Hello, Professor Psycho. Hello, students. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about my topic, which is childhood stress. So I'm going to go ahead and start. My topic is childhood stress and the impact it has on education across groups. This topic was interesting to me just because I have experienced some stress in my life, and as an educator, I have met several students who have undergone some pretty traumatic life events that have experienced some stress. So this topic was interesting to me. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. The American Psychological Association has identified children ages 8 to 17 that say their stress level is actually higher than that of adults. So that was really interesting to me. So stress, first, it's important to know that children are being affected by it. And then secondly, what it is. So stress is commonly defined as the state that results when people cannot cope with either internal or external demands. So basically, there's a factor that's impacting the student, and they're having trouble dealing with it. Stress has become an issue so big that it's no longer just about the mental health community. It's no longer just about healthcare professionals. Now as educators, it's something that we're dealing with at all levels. So I want to talk a little bit about those internal and external sources really quickly. So internal sources of stress, things that students are feeling on the inside, physical things, hunger, pain, illness, fatigue, having certain characteristics that they feel are maybe holding them back. They're shy, they're overly emotional. The external factors are things, that they're feeling, and it's not happening inside of them. So it's external. Physical things such as they're separated from their family, they're having exposure to conflict, there's a divorce happening in their family, they're being moved to a new home or to a new school. Maybe there's a death of a loved one, or, two families kind of coming together. So these are both internal and external factors that affect our students. So it's important that we know what those are and we can identify those as educators. Now, understand stress can happen, and it can kind of be categorized into two different categories. The first one is acute stress. So that's something that comes on and it's sudden, and then it subsides because, the student, finds a solution, or they were stressed about a particular test and now that test is over. Chronic is when the stress is ongoing and it's lasting for a long amount of time, and it can have serious effects. That is something that I think we definitely need to do some more research on, and we need to study the effects of chronic stress. Because what I've researched, what I've found is that it actually, it affects hormones. So cortisol is a level that we have, and when that hormonal level is elevated for too long, it actually has some pretty scary, effects that it can have on the student. So if we take a look at this chart right here, so these are resting cortisol levels. The solid line indicates low-income families. The dashed line indicates middle-income families. These are actually young kids, 7 months to age 4, and it just shows how the levels increase and they begin to get elevated. And it's definitely something that we need to take a look at seriously, because if that's happening at such a young age, how far are they getting? How much are these levels increasing? Something that, is pretty taboo, people don't like to talk about, is suicide. And I think that one of the most extreme responses to this chronic stress would be attempting or completing suicide. And I think that that is definitely something that we've seen on the rise in schools today. I know that in the community I I teach in. We've had 2 really big suicides over the past couple of years, and it definitely affects, the students in the building as well as the teachers, and it's something that we definitely need to talk about. Switching now just to the socioeconomic divide, there are clearly 2 different groups: affluent and people who come from impoverished families. So affluent families are looking at stresses that have to deal with school-based. So they're stressed about, am I going to get an A on this paper? Is this assignment going to be up to par with my other classmates? Am I going to get into the school that I want to get into? And then we take a look at families who come from poverty, and their stresses are definitely more chronic because they are thinking about things such as, am I going to have enough money to buy lunch today? Is my mom going to be able to keep our, house or our apartment? They deal with family conflict and turmoil as well as exposure to violence. So those are 2 different kind of groups and their pressures. So one student that I interviewed was a student that I actually used to teach at Oxford High School, who's now a member of our International Baccalaureate program. And she says that she spends roughly about 5 hours a night doing homework, and she's constantly stressed. She's constantly coming into my classroom and telling me how she slept for 2 hours and how she's worried about the grades that she's going to get on this assignment because she wants to get into the University of Michigan. So that's kind of like the affluent piece of society that stresses more so about school-based. And those things can be, like we talked about earlier, they can be acute because once that assignment is complete or, the semester is done, that stress kind of goes away. Whereas, people in poverty, 1 in 4 students are faced with poverty. People in poverty, that's not necessarily going anywhere anytime soon. So that's definitely something that as educators we need to keep in mind as we're dealing with those different types of socioeconomic divides in our classrooms. Students in impoverished environments, they tend to have a lack of parental investment. So their parents aren't reading to them as much. They're not stimulating them cognitively. They're not having appropriate, toys and things like that. They're not using educational materials. So that's definitely something that we're going to see in our classrooms. And then that kind of snowballs because they're not having that type of engagement at home. They come to school and they can be labeled as things like, oh, they're challenged in the classroom. They're learning disabled because they don't have exposure to those things outside of the classroom. So I definitely, after researching, I'm taking a look at how these 2 groups are impacted, and there's definitely a lot more that goes on with people who are impoverished. Like I said, students who experience this stress do begin to perform lower in our classrooms, and they can, like I said, get labeled, leading them to have behavior problems, because if you're continually the person who's getting labeled, then you tend to act out against the teacher or even other students. So the question is, what can we as teachers do about this? So as teachers, we can provide an environment where our students can learn, they can grow, and they can experiment. And I think that that's a lot in one sentence. I think that we have to have an environment where the students can feel comfortable and they can make those mistakes and make those, those changes to grow. And that's definitely something that we want to do in our classrooms. We can recognize what stressed out students will look like. So a lot of times parents will just kind of write their kids off. They're being dramatic. They're worrying about nothing. But as educators, it's important we understand what this looks like. So maybe there's a student who doesn't want to participate in gym and all the kids are calling them lazy, but they're usually ridiculed because of their weight. Or there's somebody who constantly goes to the bathroom during group assignments because they are socially, stressed out and they don't want to be put into a group with, they don't have a ton of friends, so they're worried about the grouping. Somebody with an eating disorder or stresses about, weight or things like that, they might skip lunch. So it's important as educators that we kind of take a look at this and we identify these types of rituals that these students may be performing. As teachers, we can also help the students develop problem-solving skills. So I took a look at a research that identified problem-solving skills in 8 steps to help students cope. The first one was identifying their feelings. So just helping them, think about, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. Then putting those problems into words. So I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling this, and this is why. The third step would be deciding on goals. So here are things that I would like to accomplish. The fourth step would be brainstorming alternative solutions to the problem, and then anticipating positive and negative consequences of these solutions. Number 6 would be deciding on a solution after considering the alternatives, and then planning the steps necessary to put a solution into effect. And then lastly, thinking and reflecting on how the plan is working, and then using these problem-solving skills until you can reach your goal. So helping the students think about what they're feeling, creating goals, deciding on, hey, this is how I want to go about solving this, and then helping them reflect on that process. And those 8 steps are something that we can do in our classrooms. That's something that we can do with students on the side. There are some students who have come to me, they don't feel comfortable eating in the cafeteria because of social issues. So just working through those issues with them and talking to them during that lunch period definitely will help. In addition, we can provide structure and order, because a lot of times, especially students, who are impoverished and come from families that are broken, they may come from a very chaotic environment. So providing order, providing specific details of what you're looking for in the classroom can really help those students kind of find the calm in all of the chaos. And then lastly, having fun and using humor. I found that to be really intriguing. I have heard of different ways that, teachers can help students, such as keeping a journal or helping them, use exercise, get up and moving in the classroom. But humor was something that was new to me. So as educators, we can actually use this in our classroom to help students. So we can help them laugh. We can make light of certain situations. In doing this, we can actually help relieve their stress. So I would love to have some further research on, that area in particular. Additional areas would be, are these methods that we just talked about, these methods here, are these methods successful in helping students, and in what capacity? Do certain methods work for certain students? So are my affluent students getting anything out of the humor, or are they so driven by academics that that's a waste of time for them? So that would be other areas to further research. And future professional development, like I said, using the humor in the classroom, I would love to explore this more and have a PD on it. I think that would be so much fun, just because it's a way that we can get students engaged and then also have them, relax in the classroom and ease some of their tension through humor. So I'd like to learn how to use that appropriately in the classroom and what times to use that at, because I'm sure that it's not appropriate all the time. So I'd like to have a PD where we do some role play, where we give some examples and kind of talk with other educators about how to implement this. In conclusion, I can definitely say that stress is something that impacts all students. It does not discriminate. So it doesn't matter what age they are in school, if they're elementary, if they're secondary, it doesn't matter their socioeconomic background, if they're rich, if they're poor, it doesn't matter. Students experience stress, and as educators, we cannot be blind to that. So we need to find ways that we can support our students and identify their stressors. That way we can help make their learning environment a safe place for them so they can excel and really succeed in our classroom. So again, just in closing, we can build and foster relationships with our students, helping them to feel safe and feel comfortable. That way they can feel like they have a place to come and not be stressed out. That way their learning can really be the center focus and they're not worrying about other outside factors while they're in the classroom. So I hope that you guys learned something from my presentation today. And I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your summer. Thank you so much.